Before I begin, drain the life force out of that like button and subscribe if this video resonates with you to help this channel's growth. Also, I've included timestamps in the description for those of you that feel antsy during any part of the video and want to skip around. But without further ado, let's talk mummies. So, a fourth summer series mummy film was just announced, with Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz both confirmed to be returning, and I want to talk about it. Now, as a pitch channel, I normally make videos suggesting, fixing, or theorizing about plot lines, but today I want to try something a little different. The original 1999 Mummy film is one of my favorite movies of all time, but although I saw loads of potential in it, I was ultimately disappointed with its sequel, and I didn't even bother to watch the third movie for a myriad of obvious reasons that aren't relevant, since this upcoming fourth movie will ignore its events. So for today's video, I want to play producer and pitch a proper foundation that this fourth film should construct their plot upon to craft the best possible product, heeding what can be learned from the highs and lows seen in the franchise thus far. When further information comes out on the vision for this movie, then I might deep dive some research into ancient Egypt and come up with a more plot-centric pitch. But for now, let's give this idea a shot instead. Let's start off by talking about Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz, along with the characters of Rick and Evelyn O'Connell that they portray, since their inclusion in this upcoming movie is among the only scraps of information on it publicly released thus far. First, I'll discuss Brendan and Rick. I'll say it, the elephant in the room. Brendan Fraser needs to get in shape. When we see him, we need to feel that we are watching the Rick O'Connell. As previously stated, in my eyes, The Mummy Returns paled in comparison to its predecessor, and Rick's characterization was a contributing factor. Whether I like it or not, The Mummy Returns took place after a 7-year time jump, and Rick and Evelyn had a supposedly 8-year-old son named Alex during that time. Unfortunately, when adjusting Rick's character to accommodate this change, he ended up coming off a shell of his former self. He just came off neutered. And I don't say that in a red pill way, but his relationship to Alex just really softened his character. He no longer exuded the scoundrel-like Han Solo-esque charm from the first movie. Maybe if the franchise built up to Rick becoming a father to a preteen through additional movies set throughout the missing 7 years, his softer side wouldn't have been so jarring. But during this fourth movie, a large 20-something-year time skip will be mandatory to account for the actor's obvious aging, meaning that Alex will now be an adult. As such, the writer of The Mummy 4 can shift Rick and Alex's dynamic to allow the former to tap more into the portrayal of the character we loved so much in the first film. The most effective method, in my opinion, is to have Rick interact with Alex as that of a peer instead of a mentor, as that tends to be the typical relationship between a middle-aged father and his adult son. Rick can still take charge and offer advice to Alex, but the nuance should come off as if he's talking to a buddy. Speaking of a change in personality between the first and second movies, Evelyn's also seemed to undergo a jarring shift, seemingly related to the time skip as well. In the first movie, Evelyn had a shy and subdued, yet confident personality, layered with a subtle self-assuredness. But after the 7 years prior to the second, all subtlety was gone. No longer did she come off shy or subdued. Instead, she came off largely independent, and her self-assuredness was on full display. Now, in real life, this progression would be a positive step for any young woman, and one that would be expected from someone transitioning from their 20s into their 30s and becoming a mother along the way. But just as with Rick's transition in personality, without seeing the many in-between years, the change comes off extremely jarring. It almost felt as if Rachel Weisz was portraying a different character. Out was the cute librarian, and in was the new sexy adventuress. During this upcoming fourth movie, given that Rachel is now in her mid-50s and therefore would have a harder time pulling off the sexy, adventurous-type character anyway, I would recommend that they instead scale back more toward the cute librarian angle to display a middle ground that was previously skipped over due to the time skip I clearly love so much. Unfortunately, both Rick and Evelyn's personality shifts between movies ended up affecting their chemistry as well. In the first movie, their chemistry was off the charts. Rick's outgoing scoundrel energy perfectly complemented Evelyn's shy and subdued energy. During their interactions with each other, both their characters' personalities even took on elements of each other. Rick's confidence would fade, causing him to become bashful and tongue-tied, while Evelyn's assertiveness and self-assuredness would temporarily come to the forefront. But in the second movie, their traits, particularly in relation to confidence and parental protectiveness, began to overlap too much, lessening the characters' complementary natures to one another. When crafting the fourth movie, the filmmakers need to understand that a significant charm of the first movie was the enjoyment of Rick and Evelyn's chemistry. That is an element that absolutely needs to be included. We need to see their wonderfully compelling, odd couple-style marriage front and center as we navigate the larger plot. Now that we've figured out a direction for Rick and Evelyn, let's now touch on other actors that should be contacted to reprise their roles from previous installments too, most important of which is John Hannah as Jonathan. Jonathan has not only been an entertaining source of humor across the movies thus far, thanks in no small part to John Hannah's amazing comedic timing, but also an avenue for tonal levity to balance out the horror. John Hannah's return is absolutely mandatory. Though not nearly as essential, there are two actors that I would strongly suggest tapping to return, and therefore figure their characters into the fourth movie's script in some respect. These actors are Arnold Vosloo as Imhotep and Oded Fehr as Ardith Bey. One of the strengths of The Mummy Returns was the expansion upon the ancient Egyptian lore surrounding Imhotep's forbidden affair with Anok-su-namun, his inevitable mummification, and the murder of Pharaoh Seti I. I would continue this trend in the upcoming film, expanding on this lore even further, which is a possible avenue for an appearance from Imhotep, with Arnold possibly utilizing de-aging CGI to seamlessly sell it. Speaking of characters from the ancient Egyptian side of the franchise's lore, though far less vital than Imhotep and Ardith Bey, I think the inclusion of Anok-su-namun and the Scorpion King would be more than welcome from the fans if the script writers can crack proper inclusions. At least in my opinion, regardless of The Rock's seeming decline in popularity post-Black Adam debacle, the Scorpion King deserves his redemption through the use of modern CGI. Jokes aside, I now must touch on Alex, a character who has conceptually frustrated me ever since he prematurely came into existence during the second movie. Though it might surprise you all, I don't want Alex written out. That would be just about the most distracting thing you could do with the character. I don't want to hear he prematurely died, or is away at college, or having an adventure in another country. No. Whether I like it or not, he's in the franchise and simply must be utilized properly within the plot. I actually think he should be in a significant portion of the movie, have a compelling romantic angle with a future love interest, and be positioned to someday inevitably take over the franchise, which is why his casting is incredibly important. But with all that said, this should not be his movie. You can start the process with the fourth movie, but fans of the previous installments are mainly drawn to Rick and Evelyn, and they absolutely need to be front and center. Just handing Alex the franchise right off and limiting Rick and Evelyn to supporting cast members will put the built-in fan base on edge. Transition slow and inconspicuously over the course of 2 or 3 movies. Before I move on, there's one last point I want to touch on regarding the returning cast. Their ages. Each actor and actress previously mentioned, with the exception of the two Alex actors, are either in their 50s or 60s. Despite this, I don't know about you, but I don't want this fourth movie following suit with many other legacy sequel films by constantly harping on and reminding us throughout just how past their primes the leads are. I fully understand that the official genre of the movies is action-adventure, but instead of presenting the older cast with intense action sequences that cause them to point out that they're too old for that shit, the scriptwriters could simply not put the characters in such predicaments to begin with. Alex and some of the newer, younger cast can fill that role instead. Those of us fans of the previous movies in the audience, aka the built-in fan base, really don't want to be made to feel that we are watching washed-up versions of the characters we love struggling to regain relevance. After all, that strategy didn't work so well for the later installments of the Indiana Jones franchise. Speaking of genre, when asked in an interview his thoughts on why his Mummy movies succeeded while Tom Cruise's 2017 iteration failed, Brendan Fraser pointed out that his own leaned more into the adventure aspect, with horror elements sprinkled here and there, while Tom's was just the opposite. I totally agree with that assessment and would recommend this fourth movie follow suit. Next, I actually want to delve into one of the previously mentioned horror sprinkles laced throughout Brendan's first two movies. Specifically, I'm referring to the Egyptian mummies requiring the life forces of living humans to regain their true forms. One of the funnest elements of the first movie was the wide array of disposable characters introduced early on, each having uniquely quirky and distinctive personalities, all of which get their life forces absorbed by Imhotep throughout the initial two acts. Imhotep returning to his true form is a slow process, with him transitioning little by little with each victim, though every stage of the titular mummy's transition is showcased, giving an almost visual countdown till completion to us in the audience. One of the issues I personally had with the second movie was that the victims drained to restore Imhotep were lacklusterly gathered all together early on and drained in a single fell swoop. This erased the incremental nature that had been so entertaining to watch in its predecessor. Given my previous suggestion that the fourth movie should return to the Egyptian side of things, complete with one or more Egyptian-based mummies yet again, the trope of them progressively draining the life forces from a new band of red shirts should also make a triumphant return. Though they definitely should take inspiration from the incredibly entertaining avenue the first movie took with this element, I came up with a clever twist so as not to come off like a shameless copy and paste job. With the concept of modern-day reincarnations of ancient Egyptian figures being suggested during the first movie and outright canonized within its sequel, I think the fourth movie should feature a mummy who had undergone a particular mummification ritual that results in them having to drain the life forces of specific individuals within the modern age, the current incarnations of those involved in said ritual, in order to regain their true form. Though I've touched on this next point throughout this video thus far, let me state it again plainly, as I view it vital to this next movie's success. The fourth Mummy film needs to not only revolve around Egypt, but also be set almost entirely, if not exclusively, in Egypt as well. In my opinion, a large part of the charm of the first film was its setting being solely within Egypt, though its sequel really put me off balance by its entire first act taking place in London. Nobody goes to a mummy movie to become enthralled by intense action sequences involving a battle in and around a double-decker bus screeching throughout the London streets of the 1930s. Remember, the fourth Indiana Jones film got completely lost, becoming a goofy and generic 1950s comedy period piece. The fourth Mummy film cannot follow suit. I understand that the first act of The Mummy Returns in London served to inform where the O'Connells are 7 years after the events of the first film, and how the treasure they walked away with at the end of the first film affected their lifestyles. But but you could relate the information through exposition without starting the movie in a jarring and slower-paced way. Adventures in locations other than Egypt can be really fun and interesting. My two favorite movies of all time are Gladiator, set in ancient Rome, and The Last Samurai, set in feudal Japan. I've even just finished reading the first issue of a mummy spin-off comic called The Rise and Fall of Zango's Axe, which takes place exclusively within the African plains, and really enjoyed it. But when you create a product to expand upon a pre-existing property, you really need to consider what fans of the property are wanting from that new product. And I can almost guarantee you that fans of the first movie bought tickets to the second one to watch another Egyptian period piece with the same spunky main characters having a new adventure involving another stereotypical Egyptian wrapped-in-rags mummy. Seeing that the third movie was set in China, dripped out with ancient Chinese mythology, was too much of a departure from what I and many other fans of the franchise wanted from the franchise. Having adventures featuring the O'Connells in a wider variety of scenarios and settings can be a really interesting idea, but I'm simply saying not to do so in a series of movies branded The Mummy. Save the more out-of-the-box ideas for spin-off comics, or novels, or video games, or a streaming show, or even an audio production. And yes, I am aware of the previous two-season cartoon series back during the early 2000s and used to enjoy watching it on Kids WB as a kid. To briefly touch on this excellent, unfortunately non-canon series, though I wouldn't directly adapt any single episode concept or arc, the Mummy cartoon featured many awesome lore bits that could be mined in a fourth movie and even beyond. For example, the show went very in-depth with Medjai lore, with the entire second season even subtitled Secrets of the Medjai. It also featured a new mousy sidekick for Imhotep to replace the amazingly entertaining and hilarious Benny from the first movie named Colin Weasler. Colin was a fellow archaeologist to Evelyn at the British Museum, whose jealousy and sleaziness led him down the route of bitch to an ancient undead mummy. I don't know, might be an interesting character to canonize into the upcoming movie, possibly even as a cameo. One last cautionary note I have for said upcoming movie is about its use of humor. Like many other elements of the initial film in the franchise, the jokes and witty dialogue were perfectly sprinkled throughout. Every humorous moment was smart and never at the movie's expense. At no point did it come off forced or out of place, but unfortunately, both subsequent films had the humor seem progressively more intrusive, shoehorned, and disruptive. Gone was the humor's intelligence and wit, tragically replaced with chuckle-worthy slapstick jokes. Humor is obviously subjective, but personally I sincerely hope the writer of this new movie manages to echo the success of the first film's lulls to align this fourth movie's accordingly. So what do you guys think about my skeleton pitch for a fourth Summer's Mummy film? I'm interested to hear your thoughts not only on a potential fourth movie in the franchise, but also on the series as a whole. Maybe you think The Mummy Returns is better than I give it credit for. Maybe you think the time skips were beneficial to the franchise's storytelling. Maybe you even have the wildly controversial opinion that the third movie is in fact the best one. Part of the reason I made this video was to open a discussion with you all. I'm a small enough content creator to not only read every single comment, but also actively engage with you guys too. So if you have something to say, blow up that comments section. Maybe together we can collectively think up some stellar ideas that could theoretically lead to the greatest Mummy installment yet. Also, if this video does well enough, I can make this kind of video for other franchises too, such as the upcoming Zelda movie, Shrek 5, or even something currently on the completely wrong track like Transformers. With all that being said, let me thank you all so much for bumping me past 200 subscribers and try to quickly sell you on a couple of my other videos you might be interested in. Right here we have a similar video to this one, constructing a new cinematic DC universe from the ground up. And over here is a video I made theorizing about the identity of the next killer in the Scream franchise. Well, That's enough out of me. Ciao, guys.